Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Marboe Nichols, and I am the host of the Heart of Dentistry podcast, where we take the ache out and put the heart back into our dental profession. Please join me as I interview various guests who have opinions and also solutions to what is going on in our profession and helping us put the heart back in. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on my first live streaming of season 3. And I'm so excited to have my panelists and this conversation. This is near and dear to my heart, and some of you might wonder why it is near and dear to my heart. I'll tell you a little bit, but not much, because it doesn't really matter. It's not my story. It's the panelists' stories, and hopefully they'll resonate with some of you. But I was raised with a very racist father, and I was raised in what I believe was a racist religion. Neither here nor there. I knew as a young child it was wrong. And I didn't necessarily have a voice or what I would know what to do with it. And as I got older and matured and came a part of this life, I realized that I do have a voice. I don't have to be a person of color. I don't have to have a certain look or religion to have a voice on wanting to get this out. So that's my whole reasoning behind this. In my podcast for season 3, I made it a goal to every quarter. My podcast comes out every week, but to every quarter have 2 topics, a guest on that would talk about 2 topics. One was either going to be mental fitness, mental health in dentistry, and the other one was diversity and inclusion in dentistry. So I have fulfilled that goal so far, and so I'm ending the season out with a bang, and I'm so excited to introduce my panel to you. What I do want you to know is that I am here to just facilitate their stories, and nobody can fault them for their own stories and their own objectives and views on the things that we're going to be talking about. We will have question and answering. Please put your comments in as you see fit, but we will probably be answering them towards the end, the last 20 minutes, 15 minutes of the program. It's going to be 90 minutes. I ask you to be respectful of my guests and their opinions. Please, when you post something, make sure that you are thinking about how you would take that if it was sent to you. So with no further ado, here we go. Let's bring on our guests. Everyone, oh my gosh, I have goosebumps right now. I've been thinking about this for 4 years, and it's been in the making for the last 6 months. And I am so honored that every single one of you said yes to showing up today and to helping not just our profession in dentistry. Sorry, Alan, but I didn't say industry. I said profession in dentistry, but also for anyone else out there. I've invited family members. I've invited neighbors that I think would get something from this and maybe would have a question or two. So this isn't just highlighting dentistry. It just happens to be that that's the profession that we are all in. But it is something that I hope everybody can think about next time they're at a barbecue in the neighborhood, or next time they're at a family event, a wedding or something like that. And yes, in the walls and spaces of dentistry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call you out. I'm going to ask you to please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think that I probably asked you to be on this panel. We're going to start with Branden Hill. Introduce yourself.
I get to go first. So I'm Branden Hill. I am the founder of a company called Accidental Sales Pros. I'm based in Philadelphia. I've been working in the dental world exclusively for the past 7 years as an advisor. I advise both dentists and practice owners. I also advise other business owners and business leaders in dentistry. So, some of the companies that the dentists may use in their practice, I advise them as well. And I advise them on things that will help them grow their revenue strategically and long term. I consider myself a person who sees the big picture in business. I have over 20 years of a background in different areas of sales and business development in many different industries, even before I got into dentistry. And I brought a lot of that knowledge to the dental world because the dental world can capitalize off of it. There's a lot of needs.
Well,
Uh-oh.
And
I think
my expertise
Branden, you froze, Branden.
can make things.
And we're gonna let you fix that in the background, and then I'm gonna move to Maritza. So, Nidra, if you can use Branden, that would be great. Thank you. So, Maritza, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and why I probably invited you to be on this panel.
Well, I am really grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation. You mentioned that you've been wanting and dreaming of this day for the last 4 years, and I am extremely honored to that you reached out to me. And so, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Maritza Duran. I am the founder and CEO of Emden Consulting Services. I launched my company after having worked in the dental profession for 18 years. I've been in the profession for 28 years now, and there was a time in my career in which I felt that there was a need for me to step out of my comfort zone and start my own company, and that's how MDent was born. I've helped over 800 dentists launch or acquire their first dental practices and really take it from vision or just a dream in dental school to one day be the owner of their own practice to actually fulfilling and running a successful dental office. And the reason why maybe perhaps you selected me is because of my background. I'm an immigrant. I was not born in the US. I was born in the Dominican Republic. I migrated to the United States at the age of 12, and so English is my second language. And I started my career as a entry level position in a dental practice, and I grew and just basically built my career from the very early start. And I worked with a lot of different diverse groups, myself included, and the cultural crashes and the affluency and working whether you have a profession or you're just an entry level employee, all of those things have really shaped me and taught me a lot. And I'm really excited and looking forward to being part of this conversation, because I feel that what I bring to this conversation is the perspective of your employees. How do we feel? How do we perceive you as the professionals, as the ones that go through the dental schools, that, as the leaders? How do we see you as your employees, and what are some of our expectations and the prejudice and things that we experience in the workflow, in the workplace, from that lens, from the lens of myself as, like a dental assistant who started making $5 an hour.
I love that, Maritza, and thank you so much for joining us. And I know as this conversation is just going to flow freely. We have no agenda except to help people and the listeners understand and maybe think twice about what it is that how they're interacting and so forth. So, Greg, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and explain why I probably invited you to the table?
Jamie Marboe, thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate it, to be with my esteemed colleagues, and what a great panelist that you've brought together, a group of panelists. So Greg Essenmacher, the CEO and founder of G&A Consulting. We help practices on case acceptance in implants and full arch. My team of coaches do. They're all amazing. I know how to build business. That's what I do. And keep all the monkeys from swinging too far on the handlebars. That's really what I do, and try at least. So for me, now I could talk about the check boxes. People know me, if they know me on social media, that I'm an out gay man, that, I'm gay, that I'm married to my husband. We're in an interracial marriage. But why I believe that you invited me, Jamie, is through conversations that we had and we have had, because I'm my authentic self. It's not the way that I've lived, even in sobriety, because I've been sober 21 years. And I'll really talk a little bit about that, because I think that in the dental community, and the reason why I actually have this shirt behind me, because I've started talking a lot about it's okay to not be okay. In the dental community and in general. And I'm not just talking about those that have all the certifications and know exactly what to say as, a therapist, but just in general as human beings, right? That we know when somebody's starting to fade, when somebody's a little different. And I'm not just talking about having a bad day, but you slowly see them slipping away. And I've had very close friends of mine in the dental community that are no longer with us, either breathing or have left the dental industry altogether because of the stress and pressures and numbers and fill in the blank. And if we're here to be in health care, then we need to take care of our health as well and each other. And so I think that's why you invited me. Either that or it's for my good luck. Those are fading fast too. So who knows? We'll
No,
after these 90 minutes. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
There's something to be said about the conversations that are in the hallways. And that's exactly what we did. And that's how we connected. And I really believe, and Branden's back on, and I connected with Branden at lunch, at Culture Con. And so, I love people. I love their stories, and I love your story. And I knew that I needed to have you on this panel. Before I even said it out loud, I knew I had to have Greg on the panel. So Sharon Parsons, will you please introduce yourself and possibly why I invited you to be on this panel?
Sure. I'm Sharon Parsons. I'm a general dentist in Columbus, Ohio. I own a small group practice where I practice with my son and one other associate. My other son died of an opioid overdose about 10 years ago. Now I also speak to groups of dentists and their staff, mainly prescribers, about addiction and opioids, because everybody, gets the opioid part, but a lot of people don't get the addiction part. And I try to bring that in because I think if you're prescribing something, you ought to know what can happen. And I think often we just don't. What do I do? Also, I have a nonprofit, A Voice for Sean. That's for the education and advocacy for the prevention of opioid addiction. Why did you invite me on here? Obviously, I didn't graduate in the last 10 years. And when I first started out in dentistry, my story was a lot different than most young dentists right now. So as a female, it was a little rough. Also, I'm a past president of the Ohio Dental Association. And while I was in that role, and also I was president when COVID hit. So, throw that in there. But when I was president, I started a diversity and inclusion council, which is now a permanent fixture at the ODA, meaning they can't ever take it away. I just saw it as something that we really needed. So I'm happy about that. Now I've moved into toward the end of my career, and I'm dealing with the invisible older woman syndrome. So I think there's probably a few different reasons that you invited me, but I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention that you have so many great stories and so many great words of wisdom. And when we were sitting at the dinner table at Hinman, at a private dinner table, and I already knew this was already in the making. And I looked at you and I thought, because I wanted to keep my options open, but I just remember going, I need to have her on my panel. And not just because of all the things I already knew about you, but I also thought about, we're both in that kind of seasoned mode. I dye my hair, but if I didn't dye my hair, I'm sure that I would have as white a hair as you do. And I really think that that's something that I don't think people understand, that they might be biased to. They might think that they're not being biased to age. And it makes me sad to think that some of us are being dismissed when we have still so much to give. So last but certainly not least, I'm going to ask Alan Stern to please introduce yourself and why I asked you to be on the panel.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm Alan Stern. I am a rewired and refired, but never retired dentist. And unlike Sharon, I only practiced for 42 years before I hung it up. Sharon's outgunning me, and that's absolutely wonderful. My story is, and it's different. I think the reason you had me here is because of the keynote that I gave at CultureCon a year and a half ago. But before that, what do? I made all the mistakes. I had all the business foibles and stumbles and financial disasters that so many people have gone through. And I hit emotional rock bottom as well as financial rock bottom. And I was able, with help, to recover and get to a point where I am able to not practice dentistry anymore. And having learned and having spoken to so many of our colleagues, it started, by the way, after a beloved colleague took her own life at age 34, and I gave us a talk on depression, suicide, and dentistry with my friend Jim Ottens of the Pankey Alumni Association. 4 people came up to us to thank us because they were thinking of, God forbid. And I realized that not only do I have a gift, but I've been so many places where these people in dark places are. And by the grace of God and by the grace of 2 incredible PhD psychologists, I was able to pick myself up by the bootstraps. And my purpose in life now is to bring joy and purpose and passion back into a profession which is supposed to be rewarding spiritually as well as materially. And when we reconnect with the why and we go back to the sacred nature of the work that we do, life changes for the better. So that's it for me in a nutshell. I muscled my way into the diversity world, a white, heterosexual, almost 73-year-old Jewish man doing a keynote for a diversity conference. Are you kidding me? But I am the son of a Holocaust survivor. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of garbage, as was my mother, and it's epigenetically transmitted into me, that trauma. And I've gotten to know people like Branden Hill very well. I've gotten to know people of all kinds of other lifestyles very well. And we are people. We forget that. And we begin to objectify and compartmentalize those who are different because our amygdalas in our brains don't know any better. And we have to think. And I think you asked me to do this, perhaps because of my good looks, but also because I've really overcome, as those of us in the older generation have overcome, the wiring that caused these things to be normal.
Yeah.
Your story matters. Once we learn that, all the other garbage goes away.
You couldn't have said it better if I hadn't written it down for how I feel about this, Alan. You've been on my podcast. Branden's been on my podcast before. And I'm going to absolutely get one-on-one with Sharon, Maritza, and Greg for season 4. It starts in September. I'm going to go to Branden before I finish out more, but because Branden, you kind of got lost there for a little bit with your Wi-Fi. What else would you like to say about, because I don't think you kind of got to the part as to maybe why I invited you to the table.
Well, you touched on it a little bit yourself. We had an amazing lunch at Dental Culture Con where we just kind of opened up about some very deep things and experiences that we had. I think it was very cathartic for everybody that was at our lunch table. And I think it was the most exciting part and the most rewarding part of that whole event. And I think from then on, we kind of realized that we have the same mindset about the importance of these discussions and what it can do for people personally, people professionally, socially, and everything. So that and the fact that I check off a couple of amazing diversity boxes, not just because I am a Black man, but more importantly, I'm a Black man from Philadelphia and I'm a sportsman. That is an ethnic group, even of itself, that needs to be protected and respected. So I know Alan gets a kick out of that.
I know. So a lot of us on here are friends, and they love to kid each other. And so you're going to get the listeners here. You're going to get some of that feelings and some of those touches, and we're going to try and not keep it too inside. But when Brandy Hooker Evans and I created the Heart of Dentistry podcast 3 seasons ago, our tagline is taking the ache out and putting the heart back in. It is now my baby, and we are still such close and dear friends. I wanted to bring up tough topics like this. I wanted to bring the things to the table. And here's a couple of reasons why. I already mentioned that I was raised with a very racist father. And what I believe, and please, the people that know what religion I was raised in, please do not bash me for saying that I believe that we had a religion that was also racist. Okay. That's my feelings. That's my story. But the other part of this is that I have friends of all walks of life. And I think women that look like me, would come to me and ask me questions that I did not feel equipped to answer when it came to certain things. And I'm here to help share your stories. And I'm here because I want to help change the temperature of what's going on, not just in the world, or not just in dentistry, but in the world. And our climate is what it is. This is not about political stuff. I want everyone that's listening to know this has nothing to do with politicals. Nobody here is going to talk about political things. They all agree that this is just your story, and you're going to answer questions based on your truth. That's all I'm going to ask of any of you. So moving forward, I'd like to start with Greg. And Greg, I would like to ask you I'm probably going to ask this of all of you, but what do you think is the number one assumption or misguided assumption that people have when it comes to somebody that might be gay and might be in a biracial marriage?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Come out with the big guns. First of all, I love the fact that you're facilitating the conversation. I think that's one of the most important things to acknowledge right out of the gate, because conversation is something that's so critical to happen now, where, whatever your family of origin is, however that happened, it does influence how I am today. Right. And how it comes out in ways, whether it's with the team that I have, the engagements that I have with others, the friendships, the relationships. Right. I don't have to be a victim of it, but it certainly influences, and to be aware of that. So to facilitate a conversation like you are in this environment, in this platform, I think is critically important. I wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
When you talk about, diversity, when you talk about communication, when you talk about assumptions that happen in communication, right, especially from my perspective, for me, there tends to be this, if you don't know, assumption happens. I do it myself, right? Yeah. I would do it with Alan, being of the Jewish faith. I do it with Branden being African-American. I would do it with Maritza, because she wasn't born here. She was born in the Dominican Republic. Until I get to know someone, I have these preconceived notions, because as humans, we fill in blanks, right? There's a great book called The Four Agreements, right, by Don Miguel Ruiz, right? And the first one is being honest with your word. I struggle with that. Another, though, is, don't take things personally. I struggle with that one the most. The third, though, is don't make assumptions, because filling in gaps when we don't have information is very common, and it's done often. The image of, for those who don't have information, when they think of gay, homosexual, when I say the word fag, it conjures up image, even in my own community, because I've encouraged my fellow homosexual men to reclaim that word. Right? Don't let the words dominate and own you. And the reason why I say that is because for so often that people will make assumptions, and those who don't know think of gay homosexual men as, they'll think of Carnival, somebody in, you know, a string bikini wearing a banana hammock and waving it in people's faces, or they're, you know, you're going to catch that, right? They're going to convert you to being gay. Well, I can tell you, like, I had the inclination from a very young age. You know, it's nothing about being caught. Well, you were married and had a kid. Yeah, because I suppressed all of those feelings because I thought that's what you were supposed to do, right? So, and the assumption of what gay looks like, I can only model the behavior. And I want to touch on this too, and this may be controversial, and that's okay. You talk about, you know, I don't know what your religion of origin is, Jamie, but I can tell you that my son married a Mexican gal, and her parents are of a faith that, you know, the faith itself does not really acknowledge homosexuality. However, they are the most kind and loving people and accepting, and there's never, ever been a hint of anything toward my husband and I. So there is what can be, you know, dogma and dictated from a religion, and you can still like get information from, and it can still be guiding principles. But so it's the assumptions piece that it's, oh, if you're this, you must be this, 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 this. It's like the colors of Benetton. Like, there's so many different flavors at Baskin Robbins. Can you make sure that you go in and get an ice cream flavor that you like? Like, can you get to know me as a human? Most people assume if you're gay that you're good at like fashion. I'm not. I'm terrible at it. But I love sports, right? Go Lions, much better than those Philadelphia Eagles. But then again, you said leave politics out of it. So that might get a little political. So I digress. But it's really about the communication, the assumptions piece and communication. And because I am this, I must be this, 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 and this. And it's that communication, those breakdowns in communication happen in the dental world. I call them microfractures of trust. And it influences case acceptance. It influences culture in a dental practice. And we see it all the time with our clients. But I don't want to go on a rant and dominate the stage here. But it's so prevalent, right? It's a moment to get to know somebody. And that's really where some of those assumptions can be dispelled.
Yeah. And you touched on so many great points that this is really about you guys and your stories. But what I love that you touched, and obviously you've had this conversation multiple times because it just rolls off your tongue in a very eloquent and great way. I can remember when I had Branden on my opening episode. So Branden, you're the opener and the closer of this season. And I asked him a certain question, and it kind of comes down to the same thing that you just said, Greg. Basically, he says, I am, and I'm just going to have you repeat it, Branden. You know, basically when you said, I am a Black man that only lived this life, I can't speak for all Black men, just like Greg is saying that he can't speak for all gay people, right? So what would you add on to that, Branden, that Greg just said?
A lot. I mean, well, one, yes, and yes to everything that Greg said. I think the assumption factor and the natural bias that people have doesn't have to play itself out in a way where it causes negativity, causes any harm or uncomfortability. It's really an opportunity to be inquisitive. It's an opportunity to learn. I mean, and it's interesting we're having this conversation in the world of dentistry or any type of healthcare where there is diagnosis. You would hope that it would be very normal in this world and in this profession and in this industry to have people take that inquisitive nature seriously and try to learn and get better. Like, you know, I just got back from, you know, a very large dental conference, the CDA conference in Anaheim, California. And it was a great experience. Everybody, you know, that I talked to pretty much enjoyed the conference. And dental conferences are different things for different people. Every conference I go to, the thing that I look at the most are the value of the connections that I made and the conversations that I had. Yes, I had a business reasons for being there. I wanted to get, you know, business contacts and leads and things like that. And that happened. But the way you walk away feeling good about any experience like that with a bunch of people is the capital that you got from the people that you met and the relationships that you built. So every time I'm in a place where I'm meeting people, I view that as people CE, right? I'm being continually educated on humanity every time I meet and interact and have serious conversations with people. So that'll help, quell some of those prejudices and biases that I may have, or as Greg says, fill in the blanks, in a way where now down the road, I'm a little bit smarter. I know there's gay guys who can't dress and, likes football as much as me. I might not have known that 20 years ago. Right. So, and things like that. So, I mean, that's kind of how I view it. And that's what resonated with what Greg said.
And so I'm going to take it a step further. When we were at CultureCon, you, Alan, and I were all there. You were on a panel, Branden, and the question came up, and I love this. I see, to me, I could just eat this all day long because I just soak it all up on people. And I'm in the Strength Finders. My number one is woo, which is win others over. I just want to know people, know them. And but one of the questions was from the stage was, how many in the audience that are Black, I use the word Black, would like to be referred to as Black? Raise your hand. You remember this?
Yep.
How many of you would like to be referred to as African American? The other half raised their hand. So one of the problems that women that look like me, or people that look like me, would say is, it's such a touchy, because I'm afraid to ask the questions. I might offend them. What if da 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 da? And then they come to me, and I don't know. Just ask them. Just ask who you're talking to. How would you like to be referred to as because when Branden, how you refer to it, and how if Greg happened to be Black, he might want African American and you might want Black, So what can you add to that? Because I thought that was a very interesting question.
It's such an interesting question because there's some intercultural nuance to that within the Black or African American community, where so many people prefer one or the other. Some people don't care, but so many people prefer one or the other. And the reason one person may prefer African American over Black is different than another. And the reason another person may prefer Black over African American is another. It's such a nuanced, diverse question. I think the best way to approach it is, 99 times out of 100, your interactions with a person of another race or ethnicity, you don't even have to bring it up, right? We may have to, but when a situation comes up where it's necessary to bring it up, just ask them. Be nice enough to say, hey, do you prefer to be called Black or African American? Does it matter? That's how I would ask. I'll say, hey, do you prefer to be called African American, Black, or does it even matter? And let that person tell you. And you will get a different answer from every single person. I think a lot of what happens, especially, with non-Black people, especially, with white people, there's this lot of apprehension, and you just talked about it, Jamie, in how to approach the topic of race, or how to even address a Black or African American person, because you're worried. If you're a good, well-intentioned person, you're worried whether you're going to come off wrong. You're worried whether you're going to offend. And I think my encouragement for people is to trust people. Trust that people can pay attention to energy, intent, and vibe, and know whether you're coming from a place of general inquisitive nature, or you're coming from a place of disrespect or judgment. And and this is kind of my message for everybody. I've been asked this question, Jamie, about a lot of my friends who are white and of other races. How do we approach these questions? And I say, just ask. If your heart is pure, it will come off in how you ask. We can tell. It's a lot of times it's just the energy.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because I ask. And so when people come to me and say, oh, I have this situation, how do you handle these things? You have so many friends that are of different orientations, and I say, I just ask. Because if anyone knows me, they know that I have a kind heart. I may be direct, but I always lead with love. And so that's my advice to them back. Now, my next question to you, because I'm going to hit you hard here for a minute, because then we're going to move on. But what would you say to, let me rephrase this. What are your thoughts on when the panel, I keep going back to the panel, the CultureCon. A couple of the panelists were like your body language, Branden, Jessica Gore's body language. It was just open, and you could just see that you guys bring it on, anything you want. I'm inviting. There was a couple that I felt like, ooh, I'd be a little more careful. Okay. So one of the comments that was made was that I'm just tired of carrying the banner for all Black people. I'm tired of it. I'm tired, And how do we, if you guys are, I'm saying you guys because this was this was somebody of color. If the people of color are getting tired of carrying the banner, which I get, how do we keep this kind of conversation moving forward if I approach somebody that is tired of the conversation? Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And I understand why it's such a difficult conundrum. Because, like I said, for people like you, Jamie, through all your well intentions, you're going to bump up against people who are in different moments, stages, and feelings in their lives. It could be just as much as you catching somebody on a bad day, quite honestly, right?
Yeah.
Or you could catch somebody who just is kind of had some burnout in terms of the whole racial conversations and just wish they would just go away. So the first thing I would like to say is this. This is why diversity matters. This is why our diverse network matters before we even get to having a diverse business. You need to have enough people in your circle of all the different groups that you can possibly think of, because two things you want to happen. When you're an ally is not the leader of the discussion or the movement or the change. The message, the voice has to come from the people who have the most insight. So if I want to be an ally into the LGBTQ community, I can't lead that conversation. You know what I mean? I have to rely on my connection to people like Greg. If I want to be an ally in the Jewish world and what they deal with anti-Semitism, I can't necessarily be the leading voice on that. I have to kind of lean on Alan and other people like Alan to direct me on where the tone and tenor and the vibe is going. So I think, you're not going to avoid catching people on bad days when conversations come up. But what you can do is just make it a habit that true allyship is saying, I'm Robin, I'm not Batman. You see what I mean? So now the nuance of that is you're being a leader, Jamie, in creating this forum for discussion, right? So, and you're letting all the people who fit these different demographics be the leading voice in that discussion. So you're doing a great job of it, even having this event. You see what
I'm Robin.
But you are Robin, and there are 5 Batman.
I love that. I got the hair to go with it. I love that. What I really want to say out loud is assume the best. If that person may be just having a bad day, and maybe even that day of the panelists, that person was having a bad day. And I know that we can't all be on, but I know that as an interaction like that will keep people that look like me from asking ever again. And it has kept them from ever asking again. So I'm just going to say out there to all the people listening that look like me, don't be scared. Remember, they're human too. Remember that it's not just about the color of their skin or their religion or their age. It really, truly is about, it's just the timing and your intention. And I think that's probably the bottom line to this, Branden. Right?
And I'll say one more thing about it before we move to the next topic. That was my answer for how to handle general discussions and general topics that just naturally come up. If you have something where you're trying to get a very deep question answered, this is where you rely on the people you have the closest relationships with. Alan and I talked about our friendship. There's certain things that Alan could ask me that he might not be able to ask another Black person that's not as close to Alan as I am. You see what I mean? So there's going to be this is why it's important to really try to develop. I think everybody should try to develop some close friendships with people that are nothing like them. Not just, a lot of people have acquaintances that are diverse, but their inner circle is not. I think it's very good to intentionally diversify your inner circle so that you can have these types of safe spaces and intimate moments.
I can't applaud that even and say enough yes and hell yes. Yeah. I have a sister that is in an interracial marriage, and so my nieces are that. And I remember asking a question at a family gathering, and one of the people in the room was sort of offended by my question. And what I loved is that somebody else in the room said, if Jamie can't ask this question here in front of the family, who can she ask? And so again, that was and I was like, thank you so much, because this person, this family member could have been having an off day. And so you helped bring me back to that, because I was like kind of almost scared, because I thought this is my family, but then you just brought me back to that conversation, and maybe it was just an off day for her. So anyways, Sharon, I'm going to move on to you. I think this is probably the most underrated area, and I'm going to talk about age discrepancy and age discrimination. And I'm in your age group, and I'm just going to say that I think that people don't realize that this is an underrated area of discrimination. And so thank you. We have other things to talk about with you, but I would like to go to the age part of it. And when things go like crickets, when things start to kind of in your background go like crickets, it's very easy for me to jump into, do people not see me as relevant anymore? Do people not, what is it? And so I would love it if you could maybe talk about a situation, without giving names, a situation that's happened to you recently, or how it could have been handled differently, that maybe age discrimination was a part of the equation, in your opinion.
Sure. It happens all the time when I go into, say I'm in a store or I'm in another situation. It happened at an airport where, something got delayed and people were asking questions, and I'd been patiently waiting. It was my turn. But the person at the desk kept looking at everyone else. And I just realized that they don't even see me. It's like I don't even exist. And I'm not a shy person. I'm not a wallflower.
No.
So that happens a lot. And then with in the office, I must get asked at least 5 times a day, are you retiring? When are you retiring? And now I think most of it comes from my patients caring, but I wish they would lead with, I so love having you as my dentist. I would hate to see you retire anytime soon, but I know that, everybody needs to retire. But, when they ask that question, I just feel myself kind of bristle a little bit, like, oh, maybe I should never have, let my hair go gray. But I have to remind myself that, maybe they're coming from a place of caring.
Yeah.
And I try to, I don't snap, I try to say, well, I'm not sure. Obviously, at some point I'll retire. But no one ever used to say anything like that to me prior to me being older.
Yeah, I understand that. As a consultant myself, I know that a lot of my clients, doctors, who bring on an associate, or they get a partner, or they get their child graduates from dental school and now they're joining the practice, all of a sudden the patients are like, am I going to have to switch? Am I going to have to, look for somebody else to care for me? That kind of stuff. And a lot of times, so for any of the practice owners that are listening right now, a lot of times they just want to slow down a little bit. They don't necessarily want to retire, right? They just want to not have the hustle and bustle of 4 exams every hour for the hygiene department. So what would you say is probably the best suggestion for any of our listeners that are actually in your same, part of this world? What would you say that they can do so that they're not assuming that either the patient's going to jump ship, like to another practice, because they don't know that they trust X, Y, and Z doctor? What would you say to any of the patients out there, but mostly the practice owners that are going through this, that has helped you get through it?
Well, I say to patients, I have no plans to retire anytime soon. But there will come a day when I am going to retire. But I have brought in wonderful associates. And I always say, who do you think is my dentist? Who do you think takes care of my mouth? Who do I trust to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then the patient goes, oh, okay. I said, I only would have someone in my office that I would let work on me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because that's, same thing. I worked as a dental hygienist for the same doctor in Idaho for 24 years. And we'd bring on a new hygienist, and they would, because we were growing. And they would say, I only want Jamie. Well, it got to a point where I couldn't, take care of everyone. And so I had to say the same thing. I had to say, listen, we only hired a hygienist that is absolutely top of his game, and that can perform and do things. I'm sure you're going to love Jennifer. She's just as great, whatever it is. I want to transition into something else that you're an advocate for, and that is opioid addiction. I don't want to talk about the addiction part right yet, not quite. I want to talk to the prescribers of the pills. Can you please give us some insight as to how, just starting tomorrow, if they work on Friday, or starting on Monday, what can some of these practitioners do differently when it comes to prescribing opioids?
Well, if you only remember one thing about this, the one thing I want you to remember is between the ages of 13 and 26, the prefrontal cortex in your brain is still forming. In that 13-year tender time period, if exposed to an opioid, you're 5 times more likely to become addicted.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that's a big wow. So, for all those of you that have kids, for sports injuries, that's middle school, high school, college sports. For us dentists, that's
wisdom teeth extractions.
And there are lots of alternatives. There have been probably at least 5 studies done, double-blind studies, where they compared the combination of Advil and Tylenol to an opioid. And the Advil and Tylenol actually has more pain relief than an opioid. Mm-hmm. So, and I always tell people when I speak, if you've changed the way you practice dentistry in the last 20 years, you should also be changing the way that you approach pain. Mm-hmm. Because, just because I learned it in school back in the horse and buggy days doesn't mean, that it's relevant now. And by the way, back in my horse and buggy days, we were taught to not eliminate pain, and, educate your patients, because pain tells you something. Mm-hmm. When you totally eliminate pain, you don't really know if somebody is having a problem.
Well, oh my gosh, that is so true. And the brain is equipped to send in the troops to help where it needs to help.
Right.
It's kind of like raising your kids and never letting them experience pain or denial or whatever it is. And then they become an adult and they think everybody's the mean bully. Right. So, wow. And then, is there anything on behalf of Sean that you would like to say about Sean? Because you did share with me one time about how he was ostracized even when he was.
Yes. Because there's such a stigma, addiction is a disease of the brain, and any organ that has a disease, there are side effects. The organ is changed somewhat, at least for a period of time. And when you change something in the brain, then what you see is a change in behavior. And we don't like that. That makes us uncomfortable. So mm-hmm. there's a stigma, and people don't want to talk about it. Sean was very ashamed. He thought he should be better than that. He should be stronger than that.
And he was a dentist.
No, Sean was not a dentist. My other son, Michael, is a dentist.
Michael's a dentist. Okay, right. Sorry.
Right. So I understand that, there's part of addiction that makes someone's behavior something that you may not want to be around. But sometimes you need to realize that it is a disease, and they deserve some grace, just like any other disease.
Yeah, it's like somebody with obesity, somebody with diabetes, somebody with heart disease. I know people that, and I'm an open book. 99% of my life, anyone could probably read online, about my past. That's just my personality, but not everybody is okay with that, comfortable with that. And I get that we're all different. And I'm going to guess that you, being the Sharon that I know a little bit about, and Sean, I don't know at all, there was probably some differences in your personalities too. And it's his story, and you supported him. And I know that this has been, I can't even imagine, a tough road. So now I want to ask you, for any parent out there that has lost a child to addiction or to overdoses or to whatever, what advice would you give them on moving on and how you moved on? I'm not saying you have moved on, but
Right.
coping.
I used intentional thinking. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but I remember the day he died. Well, what many of you don't know is my mother died the same morning. She came to my house to be with me and keeled over of a heart attack.
God free.
I remember thinking, I have patients who have lost children, and they seem to just go into one of two camps. They either like drop into the abyss, or they seem to move forward with purpose. And I thought, I don't want to go into the abyss, and I need to move forward. I need to still be of use to people. I had a practice. I had people counting on me. And I wanted to find something good to come from it. I wanted to do something, and I wanted to honor my son. And some days when I'm really down and feeling sorry for myself, because you have those days.
Yeah.
I just call it turning it on its head. And I think about, well, what if I never had him? There are people who so want a child and they're never able to have a child. And, I didn't get to have him in this world as long as I wanted. But being his mother was one of the greatest joys of my life. And how lucky I was to be able to do that. And sometimes that's how I have to look at it, to kind of get myself out of that dark place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that. You're such an amazing, strong woman. I have so much respect for you. And I just learned another little piece about you. I had no idea that your mom and son both passed away on the same day. I'm so sorry about that. And I know that's not what you want to hear from me, but man. Okay, transitioning here. Okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm going to go with Maritza. I'm going to ask you to, talk a little bit more about the transition. My mother-in-law was born in Germany and raised, and she was moved with her family at age 12 to the United States. And I know her stories. I would love for you to share a little bit more about what those early days look like. And then I also want you to share with what maybe you advise some of your clients on with people of diversity and different nationalities. Because I do think that, like, the DR, people don't look at it as a certain way or do, you know what I mean? Anyways, I'm going to stop there. So tell us a little bit more about those first few years, what that looked like for you in dentistry.
Sure. So, Sharon, I'm shaking right now because I'm a mother, and I know that they're such a blessing. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing that with us. So a little bit about my background and my transition. So you mentioned your grandmother came to the United States from Germany when she was 12. And I did come from the Dominican Republic at that age. And my history or my story is a little bit different because I was in what I consider to be the first generation in the U.S. So typically the the standard way of migrating, it's like your parents go, they sort of get established, and then they bring you on. And that's partial because ultimately I came to live with my father and his family. So I I was born out of wedlock, and so like I never really lived with both of my parents, and
So
so
we're both, just for clarity, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, Maritza. Your mom was Dominican Republic and your dad?
both my parents, and
okay.
I was
Checking.
born there, but I never really lived with my father because I was born out of wedlock.
Got
So
it.
I just knew my father was, he was a very hardworking man. He came to the U.S. in the 60s, didn't speak the language, and came to the Spanish Harlem area in New York, started, washing dishes and, at a restaurant. And ultimately he purchased the restaurant and the building itself. So he was like a very, I guess, entrepreneurial individual, but with the limitations, the language barrier and the time in the 80s in New York City. And so when I was born, I just knew that it is everyone's dream to come to the United States. And I was born, and I knew that at one day that was sort of like my ticket to freedom, or like the ultimate dream of everyone is to be able to come for a better life to the US. But then it was where I was separated from my mom because I was not living. We weren't really like a family. I was like the only child from the relationship, and so I came to live to the United States with my family's father. I have amazing brothers and sisters older than me, but it was just the shift, and the change was so drastic and so like drastic that I ended up leaving my father's house at the age of 14 and renting rooms and staying with some roommates here and there, and I was homeless at the age of 14. And
Homeless?
homeless. I was basically sleeping over at friends' houses and renting. That's also something that we do when we have a family, and they basically have a room that they rent for you for 60, back in the day, 60, $70 a week. Now it's a lot more. And those are just those transitional periods. I was going through a lot. I lost my grandmother, who was the most amazing woman in my life. I came to the US, and the day that I was coming, I was brought in to get my hair done, and I was so excited. And I remember, this is something that stays with me. I don't think I've ever shared it with anyone. I said bye to the most important person in my life through a mirror because I was getting my hair done, and I'm an 11-year-old girl just so excited to go to the hair salon because I was traveling to the US, right? Like I was a child. I did not know what how my life was going to be, or that I wasn't going to see my grandmother ever again. And so then that was a really challenging time, the transition when I came to the US. I ended up leaving my house, my father's house, and made it on my own. I found this job as a dental assistant I worked in a supermarket, and very interestingly, because I didn't have a place to stay, I had a really amazing bookkeeper at the supermarket that I work with, and this is something that I tell my doctors all the time. You don't know who's going to be the unconscious partner to help you grow your business, because you're helping them fulfill something that is a purpose for them. So when I was working in this supermarket, and I was and I was a cashier, and I was a very hardworking person. We take pride on being physical, hardworking individuals. It's a cultural, Latin, Hispanic thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working hard because I have a dream, and my purpose is I want to reunite with my mother. I need to support myself, pay my rent, and I had the dream of turning the legal age so that I can petition my mom. Right. So I was always working. As I was working as working while I was in high school and all of these things, I got myself a job in a supermarket right next door to the supermarket. There was a dental assisting school, and one of the dental assistants that was going through a internship in one of the offices said, I need someone to help me with the instruments and taking x-rays. Would you be willing and to come in and try it out? And that was my first, employer. He was a Jewish young guy who was really ambitious and wanted to grow and expand and open multiple practices. And I came in not knowing how many teeth I had in my mouth, and the rest is history. But yeah, so interestingly enough, I lived with the German lady because when I was working in the supermarket, there was someone that did not want to go to a home, and I was like, listen, I am paying rent. If I am able to get a place where I can sleep, I'll be so, like grateful for that. I never charged her a penny or anything because so I lived with this German lady. I learned so much from like her history, food, and everything. I loved it so much. Um, and so I started my career working as a dental assistant.
And
And
how old were you?
16. I was 16 when I started working, and when I
Yeah.
graduated from high school, I was able to be given I was promoted to front desk, and then there was an office that my employer was opening in a very Spanish, like demographic area in the Bronx, and he said, like, would you like to run that office for me? And I jumped on the opportunity, and that's how I was able to petition my mom and bring her to the US. And so I was the first generation, I say, because I didn't come with my mom, and you have that. And when you go through those puberty like years and without a role model as a woman,
Yeah.
it is very challenging. I had a lot of stigma and a lot of prejudice because I was a, Latina girl living on her own. So I developed this shield where I did not want to speak to anyone because I didn't want to be perceived as someone that was, yeah.
So let me ask you a question, and then because we want to make sure we have time for question and answering, and I've got Ellen still to go to, but do you know who Edna?
Yes, Edna Abreu.
Abreu. I had her on, and she gave some amazing statistics about Latinas, especially, but Latinos in dentistry.
Yes.
I think she said, and if I'm misquoting her, just know it's me misquoting, it's not her. But out of all the dental practices in the United States, 40 to 60% of them have at least one Latino in the office. But very few are dentists or office managers and even hygienists. They're typically assistants. They might be a receptionist or the business team member. And I just love.
I think she froze. Was it me?
Is that me? Okay. Sorry. We got the door open. That's why my door is open. But one of the things that was just so like mind boggling to me. And her mission is to try to get more Latinas stepping up to bigger places on the stage, so to speak. There's not a lot of speakers out there. There's not a lot of, so what's in 2 minutes, what's your advice to any of the Latinos out there that don't feel represented in the dental space? What would you say are some of their first steps? And then my part 2 question is, how can practice owners and office managers that are not Latino and Latina be more understanding of what's going on, what the temperature and everything that's going on right now in our country, and how they can better support our Hispanic brothers and sisters?
Well, to answer your first question, your question was, what is the advice that I give to those individual colleagues of mine that are working in entry-level positions in dental practices? I always say this, and this is my mantra: no matter who signs your check, you work for yourself. I knew every time I was speaking to a patient, that was my patient. And every interaction that I always carried out, I knew that I was working, and the office that I worked for was the vehicle for me to fulfill my personal aspirations. Starting with reuniting with my family, I was able to grow and purchase my first house, start a business, and do so many things in the profession that I am proof of what is possible, right? Like, I didn't come in having all the answers. I did not know how many teeth I had in my mouth. I worked on myself. I read all the books. I attend the seminars, and I surrounded myself with individuals that were always supporting my vision. I always have, like, these are my 5 principles of success. The first one is always having a vision and a purpose. The second one is surrounding yourself with the right people. The third one is managing your numbers and understanding, because that's another conversation maybe for another day. Like, we don't have the same resources or financial abilities to be able to start off where some of you that have been here historically for many years. So we're not starting at the same point. The fourth principle for my life is training, always learning something, always bridging that gap from where I have been to where I want to be, and developing systems and processes that if I know something is working, I want to be able to replicate it and keep on trying it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to find myself the who can help me instead of the how, because the how may push the timeline, and I want to be able to get to someone that immediately can help me solve this. So I go through those principles. So that's what I will tell my individual and team.
So what advice would you give to the practice owner? Because Edna brought up so many eye-opening things for me. Maybe some of their Latino coworkers just had somebody deported, and now their income is half. Or maybe they're worried that they're going to be deported, somebody in their family, and they don't want to say anything because they don't want to be judged. They this is like real stuff happening right today, right? And when we get to Alan, we've got real stuff happening right today within his community of people. But so what can we do? What can our practice owners, our office managers, and our coworkers, what can they do to open up that conversation, open up that door, and make our Latina people feel more welcomed, and that they've got a soft spot to lie their head on if they need somebody in the office?
I think that that's a very touchy conversation, because the dentists, it's struggling in their own way with meeting certain needs and demands and so on. But I do feel that when there is synergy and when you have empathy and you have the acronym TEAM for me means together everyone achieves more. So everyone is working individually on their own purposes, and ultimately collectively, from every individual working on their particular purpose, we are able to create and grow collectively. And so you have the responsibility as the business owner to know that your vehicle is your practice or your business is the vehicle for each individual that it's on your, driving along with you, heading towards a destination. And if someone, it's like one of the wheels of your vehicle, if they are experiencing something, it is in your best interest for the collective or the well-being of your business to address their concerns as well. And I do feel that when you do have a relationship where, like, my former employer used to always come to me and ask me questions like, is everything okay on this part of your life or in this area of your life? And to be honest with you, a lot of times they don't even know your situation. Like,
I know, because they're afraid to talk about it sometimes, right?
Well, the individuals will be afraid, but think about it from this perspective. I'm unable to work in the US unless I have a social security number. So my boss is going to assume that I'm okay. It may be someone in my household or in my family that may have an issue.
That's my point.
And so that is touchy, because then the dentist themselves needs to have an open conversation or communication or trust. I think there has to be a certain foundation of trust in order for the person to open up for that. Yeah. But you can do that. You can ultimately say, this is a safe place and we're in this together. I've seen offices that do drives or raise funds for someone in the, on someone else's family that it's going through like a financial hardship time, and together everyone achieves more. So for me, it's like finding out and opening the conversation and letting them know that it's a safe place for them to come in, and finding ways of supporting them.
Yeah. And it even comes down to patience. And we're going to move on to Alan. Man, the time just goes so fast. I think too, just to add on to that, is that know your state laws when it comes to immigration, know what's allowed and what's not allowed in your backyard. Just find out what is allowed and what you can do to protect your patients and or your team members when it comes to this stuff. So last but not least, of course, we have Dr. Alan Stern. Alan and I are great friends. I will not hide that. We absolutely adore each other on so many levels. And Alan, there's so much, you have so much that you could share today, but we're going to stick to the whole practice owner and Jewish practice owner. Okay. So I want to kind of focus on that. One of the things that I want to ask you, and I did tell you that I would probably going to ask you this. As a Jewish practice owner, did you ever have another employee or team member that was Jewish besides your friend? I don't even know if Fran's Jewish or not, but your wife.
Yeah, I have.
You have. And
yes.
So when it comes to, but have you mostly had, the reason I'm leading up to this is around the holidays, you know, as a practice owner, and we got all these people taking 2 weeks off around the holidays and Christmas to celebrate the birth of Christ, you know, and all that stuff. Tell us, kind of walk through how you as a Jewish practice owner handled sometimes these sensitive situations in your practice.
It never occurred to me to handle it as anything other than another person's reality. You know, I was Jewish educated from ages 1 through K through 9, and I have that heritage, faith, spirituality ingrained in me. And you know, in part of my education, back in the 60s, and by the way, for the record, I'm older than Sharon. So,
and just for the record, you both are older than me.
And I'll tell you this, kid, Sharon.
Category, but you guys are much older than me.
You know, there was the implication, the subtle implication, and it wasn't overt, it was subliminal, that we are better as Jewish people, the chosen people. But what I learned through my experience in working between college and dental school is that we're not any better than anybody else. And we are chosen to do good in the world. And when I got to know non-Jewish people in public high school and in college and beyond, I came to this realization. Are you there, Jamie? Should I keep talking?
Yeah, we've got you, Doc.
I'm sorry, keep going, Dr. Stern.
I came to the realization that we're just people. One of the pivotal experiences in my evolution, and Branden, you'll appreciate this. I worked in a corporate dental center. When I opened my practice, I worked part-time, and we had a Black girl have a loss in her family. I went to her home, and I got to experience and, you know, to pay condolence call. I know what grieving is, but I got to see the world through her eyes. And holy smoke, these people, they're human beings that have issues that are much different than mine. And I evolved to a point where it never bothered me in my office that somebody needed Christmas or Easter. In fact, I needed to educate them that I needed Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Seder nights for Passover off to do what we do. Mm-hmm. So, Jamie, that was never an issue. When I worked retail, I always volunteered to be the guy who closed up on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a problem for me.
I love that. But I love that. And I'm also going to say that there are people out there, practice owners. I'm always trying to think about how I can help my clients, the practice owners, because they're the ones that hire me, right? How can I help them with answers to things that I don't have the solutions for? And so this is a little bit selfish on my part, because I know what my heart says, but hearing all of your stories helps me be a better coach too. I'm going to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so they'll say, you know, some people taking their birthday off is a big deal. I don't understand it. I never take off my birthday. Them taking off a Jewish holiday, they just don't understand it. the practice owner who's not Jewish.
Mhm.
So I really think it's important that you're a different breed, you're a different cat, and we all are. But you have such a great simplistic, in my opinion, approach to a lot of hard topics that people want to make harder than they need to make hard.
Yeah, I've been called simple by a lot of people, Jamie. That's okay. Branden Hill calls me
What
that
I
all the time. But, it goes back to a couple of things, and I'm going to drop off to something that I wrote about recently, a word that I coined called amygdalization.
I saw that.
When a white person sees a black person, when a heterosexual person sees a gay person, it trips us. This is different. And we have to engage our minds saying, this is a human being. He just doesn't look like me. He doesn't have the same belief systems, spiritual belief systems that I do. And we need to de-amygdalize ourselves with what Sharon referred to, our prefrontal cortex, and start thinking like executives and say, all right, tell me more. I'm curious about this thing you call Christmas. And why is it so important, for heaven's sake? And I think once we approach one another with curiosity, when we get rid of, and I have something, I'm delivering a sermon tomorrow night in my synagogue, as a matter of fact, when we get rid of this primitive tribalism that we hide behind, and we call it religion, that we pervert the name of God by saying, oh, that one is wrong, I'm right. Let's just eliminate or kill anybody who doesn't believe that this is God and this isn't. When we stop that, when we de-amygdalize ourselves and begin to see a human being who believes that God is this, or who's pursuing the truth in a different brand, it's Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper. That's all it is. So if you want Christmas off, go for it. You're not hurting anybody. If you want to take your birthday off, that's a separate discussion. That's personal time off that we need to put in the bank. And if you want to put your PTO in the bank, great, use it any way you want. I never took my birthday off. Wait a minute. But I was the boss. I'm to blame for that.
Yeah.
I think it's all about curiosity. It's all about understanding that the ethical pursuit of the truth is just that, no matter what can of soda you're drinking it out of. It's all about, we need each other.
Yeah.
May I digress for just one moment, Jamie?
Please do.
I'm married 49 years. I know how to take no for an answer.
And I love your wife, Fran.
Do as I'm told here. But Branden hit on something and Greg hit on something, that we need each other. And when the civil rights movement emerged in the 60s, that didn't get done without the help of the non-Black population.
Mm-hmm.
I take great pride in saying that the Jewish people were right there next to the Black people in the 1960s. I think the non-gay community, the heterosexual, I don't know what you want to call it, Greg, but you know where I'm coming from. I don't have to put any labels because you and I are friends, and you know I'm coming from a place of goodness. It's so important. But I think gay people established their rightful place in the world because of non-gay people who became allies. The same thing for Hispanic folks, the same thing for women, and the same thing for aging people. I have a good friend, my friend Jeanette Liardi. Sharon, I want to introduce you to her. She is combating ageism. And she taught me to proudly declare that on June 22nd, I'm going to be 73 years old. And I'm damn proud of it. I'm damn proud of who I am at this age and what I can do.
Yeah, what you can do.
I can
Things
do.
that you couldn't do when you were 50, Alan.
I could still be, I could beat Branden Hill to a pulp at age 73. But all of these things, all of these labels, all right, we need some of them. because I belong to the Jewish community. Branden to the Black, Maritza to the gay, to the Hispanic, Greg to the gay. Sorry, no, I'm not.
I'm still gay, right? Like happy gay.
Well, yes, that's right. And Sharon is a woman dentist who's becoming more and more of a majority than a minority. We need those things, but we also have to recognize that we all sit under this umbrella of humanity. And in this day and age, where we are being amygdalized by forces bigger than us that we can't control, the one thing we can control is what we all have been talking about today, and that is our reaction. And that's the realization that we need each other. I, as a practice owner, whatever I was practicing, I needed those people.
Right.
As much as that, and I needed my patients.
Yeah.
As much as they needed me for care, as much as my team needed me for a paycheck. We must realize that all of this diversity stuff doesn't matter. It's worthless unless we realize we need each other. There's no law, there's no regulation, there's no rule that's going to get rid of this.
Yeah.
It'll quash it for a while, but that pot's going to blow.
100%. And I think that the whole reason for me doing this is because, okay, I'm not Black, I'm not gay, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not, whatever it is. But I know if not me, then whom to bring this together? If not now, then when? And I think that while I've been wanting to do this for 4 years, obviously my higher power said it's now. And I cannot be more proud of every single one of you and your comments and your words and your thoughts that you have brought to the table. I am hoping, and go ahead, Greg.
I wanted to make a comment. There's so much truth and authenticity coming from all my fellow panelists, and I'm just honored to be on here with. And I want to speak to all the listeners because I think there's so much richness here in it that we may be standing up here on the stage, right? And in all of our courage and bravery, talking from a place of authenticity. But I want to encourage everybody that we may have found our voice already. There's so many that mask, and I did for a long time, and I masked because I worked for a very large corporation. I was in corporate America before I started my own brand, and I masked, or at least kind of sheltered or shaded parts of myself to fit in to what I thought I needed to do. And I think there's such a huge conversation, maybe that can be, your next season, Jamie, to launch into. And I just encourage everybody, and Branden brought it up, and I thought it was so crucial to talk about this for like 30 seconds, which is find a confidant of somebody who's not like you, that you can share and express openly and say, can I just share with you? And it might sound wrong, it might come off wrong, but it's from a place of love. Like, how do I even talk to you as a fellow Jew? Like, how does it feel to be a Jewish person today with all that's going on with fill in the blank, or a Black man, or how do I say that, or an immigrant and fill in the blank, or with somebody that's talking about, losing a son, a child, because my niece just committed suicide 3 weeks ago, and I had conversations with her over the years about addiction and talking to my brother. So it's okay to not be okay, to ask the questions. And I just encourage all of the listeners, find someone safe, say the things in your head out loud quietly, and find someone safe to do so. We might be the brave ones that are doing it in a public forum, and we might get a little bit of backlash, or people might in a quiet room be like, "Oh, can you believe you said that?" And that's okay too. But I just encourage everybody, just speak up.
Well, and I won't even and to emphasize that, I'm sure every single one of you would be just fine with if they've got all your contact information, if they were to reach out to one of you guys, right? We've got a few minutes left. I really want to make sure that we have some question and answering time. And Nidra in the background is taking care of that. And so I'm on full screen. I don't know how I see the questions. I don't know if they come on and ask Nidra. how are we going to pose the questions? Because I do. And I know we're supposed to end at 4, but if all of you are okay, if it goes 5 minutes over, is that okay? Because I want them to be able to ask questions. So Nidra, how are we going to go about the question part? That's one thing we didn't quite go over it.
Jamie, if we go to 4 o'clock, that's another 3 hours in my book. So I just want to be okay with you all knowing that not all of us are East Coast. So you're supposed to ask. You're not supposed to assume. Didn't we just talk about that earlier? All right, panelists, give it to her.
Panelists,
give it to her.
I always forget what time zone you're in, Greg. I know that Branden is Eastern, Maritza's Eastern, Sharon's Eastern, Alan's Eastern. You're the only one that's the oddball.
Which one of these is not like the other? Sesame Street taught us that, right? Which is not like
okay, so Nidra, do we have some questions? She's going to have to come on. I cannot see any questions. All I see is my panelists.
She says
no questions.
No questions. Can I ask a question? No, I'm just kidding.
Wait,
I have a lot of questions.
Go ahead and read the question, whatever it is. I can't see it.
It says someone sent a private message that says she hides her face because of her age on social media.
Wow.
Wow.
So, okay, Sharon, I got an answer. Alan's probably got an answer, but Sharon, why don't you go ahead and talk about that? That's a hard one because everybody.
That is a hard one. I mean, you have to. Well, first of all, you need to find a way to start loving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time to do that. I was kind of late to the game with that. I had very strict parents and, they were tough on me but I did some work on me and learned to love me.
Yeah.
And, I found that since I have adopted that, it's so freeing,
Yeah.
Letting my hair go gray was freeing.
And I agree with that. I have a very good friend who's big in the industry, and a lot of you know her, and she will not tell anyone her age. I have no idea. And I'm one of her closest friends. And she just said it's self-preservation for the industry profession.
Can I add something?
Thank you.
I feel that my advice to this individual is authority sells, and you need to own the place that you have experience. Experience cannot be improvised. Someone shared once something with me that made me realize that I was really focusing on just like coming and moving up the ladder. They said to me, we are all climbing this mountain, and when you reach the top, you realize that everyone is on the same path. But then don't forget to look at the people that started the journey. You're looking up to the people that started the journey before you. And so you're looking up to them, but don't forget to look at the people that are just getting started in their journey. And you need to keep that balance. So I look up to the Sharons, the people that are mentors to me. And I also have the responsibility of looking at those who are looking up to me because they may be younger or just getting started. So.
Okay.
If I may, being the oldest one here and damn proud of it. Listener, write this down, please. My dear friend, Jeanette Liardi, who was my sorority sister back in college, she wrote a book called Aging Sideways. I would urge you to get that book because it is, we at this stage of life have accumulated skills that younger people simply don't have. They can do things that we can't. The Yankees need a pitcher in their bullpen, and I'm afraid I can't do it. I'd love to save the Yankee season, but I'll be 73 in a couple of weeks. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
But there are things that we have accumulated in the world of dentistry that younger folks are blind to. Not because they're dumb, not because they're untalented, because they don't have X number of years of dentistry or of life under their belts.
An experience.
Use it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Use it to your advantage. Somebody told me, a very, very prominent speaker in dentistry told me to never admit my age because I'd become irrelevant. And I call New Jersey word that I won't use here on that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
a lot of some of my clients call me their dental dad.
Yeah.
That's
And that's
okay to say.
endearing. That's endearing, right? Embrace it.
It's
What's
respectful.
What's another question we have, Nidra? Did you guys see any more questions? I don't know why I can't see any questions.
I mean, I thought they called Alan their dental daddy, but that's a whole nother conversation and probably another podcast and a whole nother platform where you got to pay like a subscription fee.
Greg, you're building a bank there, brother. Oh, look out.
I held it together for the legitimate amount of time, so now we're in overtime.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, this is where
I'm going to temper you down here. Okay, so there's another question that we have. Can anyone, Sharon, can you see the other questions?
As of now, we have no questions.
As of now, we've run through the gamut of questions. The panel answered them all in their eloquence.
Throughout the whole thing?
Yes, they did.
Okay, great. Well, I'm just going to end on one last note, and then I'm going to thank everybody. So my closing thought is that the goal isn't perfection here, right? We're not going to all of a sudden become the best at inclusion and understanding diversity in our space. But the goal is awareness and curiosity, empathy, and action. And when each person that shared their story here, I hope there's something that you could relate to, any of our listeners. I hope that there's some little nugget or takeaway that you can think about differently when you're in a room with somebody that might have a different sexual orientation, or that might have come from another country and migrated to the United States. And I hope that the audience leaves with an inspiration sort of feeling, and that when they leave, they can have something that they can implement within their own lives. And I just want to thank all of you again for joining me. And I will be having most of you on again. I'm joking, Greg, when I said most, because I was going to say, but I
knew who you were talking about there. That was pretty obvious.
I'm joking. I mean, you're probably going to be one of my very first people that I have on for season 4, but thank you again. And thank you to the listeners and the people that tuned in. And we will have this recorded. It'll be, everybody will be able to post that onto their social media. And everyone, be kind to each other.
Thank you so much.
The Heart of Dentistry podcast, where we take the ache out and put the heart back in to our dental profession. Nice.